Yeah, I'd have to say, yeah. Is that better? Yeah, so a little small coal mining town, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that town and how it influenced my recent book called In Defense of Adversity, Turning Your Toughest Challenges into Your Greatest Success. How many people would think that the difficulties in our lives are for a reason and help you to grow and become a better person? How many would you agree with that? So how many of you face those obstacles in your life in a positive manner and can't wait to overcome them? Raise your hands. See, not many hands went up, but most often we run from the obstacles. We run from the adversity. We don't take them on and face them. But they are, I always say, you're in a classroom now, you're learning. Life's a classroom, and every day is an opportunity for you to learn and become a better person, especially around handling and dealing with adverse situations. And I say adversity is meant in our lives for a reason. It's to help us evolve into the people we were meant to become. How many athletes in here? I know there's some hoopers in here. How many athletes? Raise your hands. For you athletes, now what's your sport? Baseball. What's basketball? What else is in here? I know some track people, soccer. Okay, let me ask you this, folks, who are athletes. When you've been in a game, do you prefer? Where do you get more enjoyment, and where do you learn more? When it's a closely fought game and you have either won or lost by few points, or when you kick someone's butt. Which ones did you really look back and enjoy the most and learn the greater lessons? With close games, right? Those were the better, the more hard fought. You learn lessons from that. Whether you win or lose, typically you learn your better lessons when you lose because you can learn how to improve. So those are more fun than the butt whipping, so to speak, because you don't learn much. It was easy. But those hard-fought games is what you practice for, what your coach works with you on to overcome and become better. That's the same with life. Many things that are difficult in our lives are brought into our lives for a reason, and that's what I'm going to talk about. As Professor Aller said, I'm not a lecturer, I'm a facilitator. So as I go through these pages, as I'm going through my talk, please feel free to ask questions at any time, okay? Raise your hand, ask questions. I like having fun. It's not about me. Today's about you and how what the topics of my book can help you in your lives, whether it's in school or whether it's your personal life as well, too. So I'm going to kick off talking about are there any juniors in here? I'm going to talk about my junior year in college. I was going to a small liberal arts school, too, called, what's your enrollment here? Okay, so I went to an even smaller school. I went to a school called Allegheny College. It's in Meadville, Pennsylvania. I played D3 football, so I was on the football team and whatnot. And it was the end of my junior year. I was in a fraternity. We were outside. It was in the spring. Beautiful spring day. Sun's out. You know, I'm going into my senior year, looking forward. My dad owned a produce market I'd work at in the summer, looking forward to, getting home for the summer, working in the store, and just things were great. Then all of a sudden, this is about noon, one of my fraternity brothers pokes his head out the door, and this is before cell phones, folks, so we did not have cell phones. He pokes his head out the door and said, "Hey, your mom's on the phone. She wants to talk to you," which I thought was weird. She never called anyhow, let alone noon in the afternoon, so that immediately struck me. So I pick up the phone, and all of a sudden, her voice is shaking. You could tell she's been crying. She said, "I want to let you know before you hear from anyone else, we lost our house." So I'm like, what the heck happened? Did Dad get in a bad business deal, or what happened? And here's what happened was the beginning of what I call my summer from hell. It's in chapter 3 of my book. My mom, the night before that, my mom called me. Her and my dad were sitting watching TV. And you know how your house settles, your certain noises you always hear. They were sitting watching TV, and they were hearing these weird crunches, cracks. This the ceiling tile was starting to break and crumple on the floor. They were going in the different rooms. Electricity died. They were going in with a flashlight. They could see cracks from the ceiling going down to the wall. So it's like out of a monster movie. So they go up to my grandmother's, who lived on our property. They said, "We better get out of here." They spent the night there. The next day, they came down and opened the door, and our house the foundation had split in two about 3 feet. Unbeknownst to us, our house was built over something called a coal mining room. Western Pennsylvania is full of coal mines. And we didn't know it, but our house was built right over a coal mining room. And that foundation essentially gave way. So that essentially my dad called the insurance company. They didn't cover that because it was called mine subsidence insurance. Homeowners didn't cover it. So essentially the house was ruined. Not like everything fell into a hole, but essentially the foundation was done. Like, there was nothing you could do about it. So to add insult, so we lose the house. To add insult to injury, insurance didn't cover it, and my parents had only 2 more mortgage payments to pay off the house. So yeah, that began this summer from hell. So I come down to the Pittsburgh paper. The Pittsburgh News was there. It made big news in Pittsburgh. It was on the TV, and they wanted to introduce my dad. My dad's a feisty Italian, and didn't want to be interviewed and let them know that in certain terms. But anyhow, we were dealing with the house, and the best thing we could do, the government contacted my dad, and it was their responsibility for the ground below. So they said to my father, he said, we will come in and fill the hole for you, and if you rebuild on our property, we'll give you a 2% loan. That was the best thing going. My dad said, let's go. Knocked down the house. They filled the hole. It was a total week of cement trucks coming in and dump trucks coming in. They filled the hole with 500 ton of cement and fly ash. So that's what they were doing, and my dad was going to rebuild the house. So bang, a few weeks later, I'm home for the summer, ready to work at my dad's produce market. And each year, my dad taught me something different. Each year I learned something. Everybody knows what a produce market, right? It's fruit and vegetables and stuff like that. Every year my dad taught me something different, whether it be running the register, ordering, deliveries, customer service, everything except pricing. How did he price the products? What was his profit margin? So we're living in a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm sleeping on the floor. We're dealing with the house. And my father, who has arthritis, was complaining about his chest a few days after I'm home. Chest pains. So I'm thinking, maybe it's time my father teaches me how he prices produce. And thank God I did, because he taught me, and the next day he was laid up in the hospital through a calcium deposit, sliced his lung, and his lung totally collapsed. So here I am, 19 years old. How many 19-year-olds in the room? 20? 18? Okay. Similar age around that you guys are, 19 years old. No house to live in. My dad's laid up. We're living in a 1-bedroom apartment. What am I going to do? My head felt like it was going to explode. I felt so much pressure at that point. It was unbearable. But it only lasted for about 10 minutes, because all of a sudden a weird sense of calm came over me, and with the realization that, you know what, my dad's been preparing me for this very moment. Not saying he was aware our house was going to collapse, but each year he's been building blocks for me to essentially, if emergency came up, I'd be able to run that business. So all of a sudden I got a sense of confidence, a sense of calm, and my parents, we decided Steve's going to run the market this summer. So I ran the market that entire summer. It was one of our most successful summers, much to my father's chagrin to this day. And while he was healing, he oversaw the house being rebuilt, and I ran the store. By the end of the summer, he was recouped, the house was built, and I was ready to go back to my senior year at Allegheny College. The only problem was I had to work so close to the beginning of school, I wasn't able to play football my senior year, so my football career ended a little abruptly, unfortunately. But everything was good at the end of that summer. Our dog died that summer too. It was a rough summer. So the next year, I'm a senior, I'm graduating. Out of my fraternity, I may have had the most job offers from any of my other fraternity brothers leaving college that year. And I wasn't the greatest of students. And Allegheny was a tough school like this was. I probably had a 2.6 or something, but it was a very good school. But I had probably the most job offers. Why do you think that was? What do you think captured their interest? If I didn't have great grades, why were so many companies interested in me? What did they want to know?
How you at 19 years old was able to run a store.
Bingo. What's your name?
Tori.
Tori. Excellent. Yeah, they didn't care about my grades. Not saying you should not focus on your grades, guys. Not saying that. Having great grades and that experience would have been the best combination. But they were more focused on How did you run a store? What did you do? What skills did you learn? How did you do that? And I was able to tell real world stories connecting the dots between what is applicable in a job and how the skills I learned that year would transfer into that job. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? And I'm going to talk to the class after this about hiring, what companies look for when they're hiring people. And food for thought for you, every event in your life, every situation in your life, take notice of it, whether it's a job, whether it's an adverse situation. You can use these to your advantage when you're interviewing. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? You know, a lot of the jobs I interviewed for were sales jobs. Salespeople, companies look for people with great communication skills, leadership, problem solving, ability to deal with conflict. Those are good attributes to be in sales. Am I making sense? With my experience running that store and what I faced, was I able to say I'm a good communicator? Yeah, I had to deal with customers. I had to deal with customer issues, customer situations. Could I say I have leadership skills? Yeah, I led running that store during tough times. Could I say I was a problem solver? Someone who could deal with conflict? Yes, I could say yes to all those and not just make that statement. I gave factual evidence that Steve exhibits these skills. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So there's multiple reasons I'm telling this story, kicking off about this story. Number one, that is maybe the most pivotal moment in my life because it changed everything. If I would have shied away and not ran that market that summer, you know, we could have closed up, maybe gone on, some sort of government assistance. Who knows where I would have been now? I wouldn't have gained the confidence. I wouldn't have gained the experience. I still may, nothing with the little town we grew up in, but it's not a place where you want to be now, right, Jim? I may still be there now. But thank God I did face that adversity and overcome it. So I firmly believe that time, as well as most adverse times in my life, have helped me become the person I am today. It was meant to happen. Does everyone understand what I mean? Does everyone understand what the word adversity means? Difficulties, hardships, overcoming problems. And if I really hit home that time, and as I was writing this book, that every really rough moment I had in life, I learned a most valuable lesson. And that's what I want to state to you guys. That's part of my main overarching goal today, is to help you realize that adversity is meant in our lives for a reason. It's to help us evolve into the people we were meant to become. When he gives you, you do some basic studies, right? Then he gives you a test, right? Or do you solve easies or do you solve problems? Which is it? They're problems, not easies. They're meant to help you grow, learn, and to take you to that next level. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Football coaches, basketball coaches, I don't think you have football here, basketball coaches, soccer, track, you go through these tough drills and whatnot. It's to prepare you for the moment when you're in that game and you are in that close game. And how are you going to function properly when the proverbial poop hits the fan in a game? So that's what I want, and that's life's the same way. Just as a coach may be teaching you, just as Professor Adler may be teaching you, life offers those lessons as well too. I fear many times, I mean, we grew up in a tough area, a lot of poverty, it was a difficult area, and so many people grew up there, faced obstacles, and became highly successful. I'm going to share that in a bit. And the youth of today, oftentimes, through different things, I think are shielded from difficulties. And I'm not a fan of, I might get weird look now, but I'm not a fan of things such as participation trophies. Does everyone know what a participation trophy is? Why do you think I'm not a fan of that? You don't learn anything. You learn more lessons. I'm sure it's under good pretenses to do that, but you don't learn anything when you are given something for not having that effort or for losing. I've learned more lessons losing than I have winning. So what I want to do today is instill that point. Adversity is meant in our lives to happen for a reason. Some people have really bad things happen, and some things are not explainable. However, how can you take that situation and learn from it and grow from it and make it something better? Am I making sense to everybody? Thumbs up? Okay. Like I said, at any time, ask a question. So let's get into the book a little bit. The book is called In Defensive Adversity. The whole point is, adversity is a good thing. Don't look at it as necessarily a bad thing. Is it fun? No. But how can we use it to our advantage? How can we leverage that to our advantage? So the inception of this book, it was based off of immigrant families from our hometown where Jim and I grew up. It's called Burgettstown, Pennsylvania. As I said, in the day, it was a coal mining town. It had zinc mines. So it was a natural influx for all these immigrant families from around the world. We grew up with every immigrant group possible, right, Jim? Everyone. I mean, it was a melting pot. So about 5 years ago, I'm home sitting with my dad for the holidays, and I'm thinking, I'm kind of bored. Let's go up and see where you grew up. And he grew up in a little village called Langloth within our hometown. And that's where a lot of the immigrant families came. There were zinc mills, zinc mines, coal mines there. And when the immigrants moved there years ago, they lived in these little tiny shacks. I'm talking about 8 families living in a little tiny shack without running water or toilets. They had outhouses. These are not pretty houses. They all look the same. They're kind of shabby. So we go up to Langloth, and my dad, who was a successful entrepreneur himself, said, that's where I grew up. There's where Dr. Spinogens grew up. There's where Dr. Straussy grew up. There's where Dr. Did I say Meropis? Meropis grew up. There's where Barry Alvarez grew up. Does anyone know who Barry Alvarez is? He's the winningest football coach at the University of Wisconsin. He's their current athletic director from our hometown, from that area. So it hit me like a ton of bricks. What a great story. You have all these families coming from all over the world with nothing, not speaking English, not speaking each other's language, and becoming doctors, lawyers, businessmen and women, athletes, professional college athletes, college football coaches, entrepreneurs, professors. I'm going to meet 2 professors this week from our hometown. I mean, it's really an amazing story, an amazing area. And I'm thinking, with such negativity in this crazy day and age, I need to tell that story. I want to tell that story. So I went about interviewing some of these families. The first was Barry Alvarez. Again, he's the winningest football coach at Wisconsin, their current athletic director. He turned that program, which was a perennial loser, into a winner in about 2 years. They won their first Rose Bowl probably 3 or 4 years after he became head coach. Now they're dominant, and they're pretty good in every sport because of his leadership. So I interviewed him about his family's journey from Spain over to the United States and all the trials and tribulations they faced. I interviewed the Meropis family. That is Donnie Meropis, the bald guy. You know who this is? That's Kiefer Sutherland. Does anyone remember the show 24? It was popular about 5 or 6 years ago. He's an actor in Hollywood, and he was on the TV show. He was a regular on one of the seasons, 24. His family's a Greek family that came over from Greece to lived in that same village with nothing and became doctors, lawyers, actors in Hollywood. It's a really amazing story. Then the last one is Pete Straussy. Pete's from Italy. Pete's father came to America and was here 9 years trying to make a living before he could even ship his family over to the United States. Pete lived in a little village in Italy with his mom and 2 sisters. Was it 5 miles away from the nearest grocery store? They had to walk there. He came here, I think, at age 14, not speaking any English. They put him in the 1st grade because, talk about humiliating being at it, but to learn English. So by time he was a senior, several years later, he was valedictorian. He had a scholarship to play football at W&J, had a tryout with the Cleveland Browns, and now he's a top cardiologist in Pittsburgh. So you have an Italian family, a Greek family, a Spanish family, all came here with nothing and became doctors, lawyers. It was really a great story, and I wanted to share that. Because I'm just touching the surface, right, Jim? I mean, you have professors, doctors. I mean, it's really amazing. My whole point was in researching all this, the common factor that made these people successful was what? The adversity that they faced. None of them had it easy. Not speaking the language, not speaking each other's language. The story, all 3 of these families, their ancestors came over here and got booted back to their mother country for some reason or another. And they had to fight to come back. I mean, it's a really impressive story. So I interviewed those families. The only problem is I'm not a biographer. So I sat on it for about 5 years. I'm like, I want to tell the story, but I'm not a biographer. It's not tied to my business. Then, strangely enough, I was telling Jim today, all things started coming together. So I published a book around this time last year based on 4 really powerful pillars. So I interviewed these family, but I also interviewed over 60 highly successful people on 6 questions about adversity. How do they face adversity? What do they learn from adversity? How do they prepare for adversity? What are habits and hobbies they do every day to help them become willing to face adversity? I talk to businessmen and women, entrepreneurs, college athletes, professional athletes, yoga instructors, doctors, lawyers. It was really a handful. I was telling Jim this morning, the information they gave me was so amazing. And I'll share that with you. Feel free to share it. I have a PDF file this thick of the people's responses to these questions. It's gold. It's nuggets. So that's the foundational principle number 1. It's based off of successful people's inputs, including those families. I also talked to, because of one of my kickboxing instructors, it is called Muay Thai. Does anybody know what Muay Thai is? I see a guy nodding there. Do you know what it is?
Is it jiu-jitsu?
No, well, jiu-jitsu is something else. Muay Thai is a form of Thai kickboxing. So they call it the art of 8 limbs. So you use your hands, elbows, feet, and knees. Jiu-jitsu is more of a grappling, but they're all mixed martial arts. So I learned about brain functionality through one of my kickboxing Muay Thai instructors about how your brain functions under stress and understanding the emotional part of your brain and the rational part of your brain. So my book's second pillar is based off of brain functionality, facts about how the brain functions. I'm going to go through all this in a bit. The third pillar is I use a behavioral assessment in my business called DISC. How many are you going to consider HR, human resources, a major? How many are going to consider that as a major? Raise your hands. Okay. DISC is a behavioral assessment often used with HR departments. How many people have heard of DISC or Myers-Briggs? Okay, DISC is similar to Myers-Briggs. It's a little more, I think, not watered down, but much more practical. I'm certified in DISC and Myers-Briggs, both. So I use this tool to help people understand how their brain functions under stress and what is your DISC style and what things set you in an adverse situation and how will you respond if you're in an emotional state. Does everyone follow? So I'm going to cover that in a bit. And then the last thing is my professional experience. I spent 21 years in corporate America. I've owned my business the remaining part of the time, so I've worked with a lot of highly successful people. So this book is not fluff. It's based off of 4 really strong pillars. Does everyone understand? Okay, any questions? Okay, so I'm going to touch this a little bit more. How many people think adversity is important or it's a hot topic now? Raise your hands. How many people raise your hands? If you Google the phrase, how to deal with adversity, how many responses do you think you get on a Google search? What's that? You can speak. I don't bite. Thousands? Any other numbers? If you Google the phrase, how to deal with adversity, it brings in over 21 million responses. You think there's a need for this topic? I'd say so. All of us need it. Listen, I need it. I'm not saying I'm the genius in overcoming adversity. Every day, there's battles for me too. But the principles I teach, I live, and it's made a big difference in my life. So the key is, there's what my book talks about, there's no silver bullet for dealing with adversity. There's no right answer. There's no specific answer now. There's thousands of forms adversity can come in, and they're deeply personal. What might be a challenge for one person is a traumatic situation for another. It can go from small things about minute things to broader things like your house collapsing in a coal mine or even worse, so it runs the gamut. It's deeply personal. So the book's not saying there's a silver bullet answer. It just provides a pathway to help you become stronger through those obstacles. For you, it's student dynamics. Do you guys face some adversity? What do you face? What are things you're facing out there? Don't be shy. I don't bite. Come on. I'll pick on you. What's that? Midterms. That's one, right? What else? Finals. Exactly. What else? Tough professors? What's that? Being broke, right? It's no fun not having no money, no funya, right? It's a rough thing too, right? What else? Stress, right? Allegheny, we had to do a senior thesis, almost what you might have to do for a doctor. It was called our senior comp. We were on trimester. We had 2 terms to research it, 1 term to research it, 1 term to write it. Then you had an oral on it. That was a dose of, that added to my angst that senior year as well, too, having that comp. But, you guys face a lot of obstacles. First time away, how many freshmen in here? Any freshmen? Okay. Anybody still homesick? I was a big baby when I went away, man. My parents were shocked. I was a big sissy. It wasn't until my second year that I finally, I got accommodated to life there. So that was adversity. So you guys face a lot, stress, demanding curriculum, constantly fast-paced environment, interpersonal dynamics, whether it's with professors or other students, things of that nature. Those of you taking on athletics and school, it's added pressure as well, too. So you guys face a lot of things. My book, as I said, it's not a silver bullet answer. My book attempts to do three things. When adversity strikes, the first thing is to assertively face it. What do I mean by that? What do you think typically people do when adversity strikes? I'm seeing mouthing here. What did you say? Run away, get mad about it, act like it doesn't exist. The key when something rough happens is to face it. It's not going away. Don't get mad about it. What can I do about it? So the first thing is to assertively face it, not run away. And I see some people taking notes. You can keep taking notes, but we're going to get you a copy of the deck as well, too. So keep that in mind. Secondly, hopefully successfully overcome it. That's when you grow and learn the most. But also, at the least, learn from it, build resilience. Each adverse situation in our lives can be a building block to help us down the road. Not saying it's easy, not saying it's fun. I don't go looking for adverse situations. But when they do happen, I have a different perspective on that now. I can probably count 4 to 5 major events in my life, one of them the house collapsing, that have been hugely influential. But they've ended up helping me in the long run. My toughest client in my corporate world was one of my turning points. That was a very difficult situation. I ended up turning into a good situation that I now use it in one of my keynote and workshop discussions. So that difficult situation I dealt with in my corporate life is now paying me dividends in money because I'm using it in workshops of the lessons I learned. Does everyone follow? So how do you spin that? How do you learn a lesson from that? Each time we can hopefully face it, hopefully overcome it, but at the least, what did I learn from this? I didn't succeed. We may have lost a game, or I may have failed. What can I learn from this? And there's no such thing as failure. There's what? Learnings. Keep that in mind too. You didn't fail, you learned a lesson. As long as you keep that attitude about it, failure does not exist. Does everyone follow? Any questions so far? Okay. So let's keep going. How you handle adversity will help you determine your overall success in college, your job, and having a satisfying personal and professional life. If you go around life being a gloomy gust because all these bad things are happening, it's not going to be a great life. You can go look at the things that are happening and how can you turn that to your advantage. How can you learn from that? You're going to have a greatly successful life. You're going to be challenged. You're going to grow. You're going to evolve into that person you're ultimately meant to become. So my book's based off of 3 sections. The first piece of advice I give is changing our perception of adversity. Not looking at it as a bad thing, looking at it as an opportunity to learn and grow. There's 2 parts to that, acceptance and acknowledgement. Accept that adversity, difficulties are going to happen in life. You can't escape them. So that acceptance goes a long way because when something rough happens, you're not surprised, you're not shocked, you're not, oh, well, here's me again. I love my mom, but I grew up with the, life gives you a deck of cards and you play those cards. I'm like, did I really come from you? Because I'm like, that's not me, that's not me. But I've had there was that negative attitude that life controls you, not the ability to control the events of life. So accept that adversity or difficulties are going to happen and acknowledge that these difficulties are meant for us to evolve and become the people we were meant to become. That's where we grow. That's where we learn. Most of you raised your hand when you said you learn more from those adverse situations. So look at those instances, change your perception of it. It's going to happen. We're playing in an athletic event. There's going to be some adversity we face in that game. I don't care how great your game plan is. When the ball's tipped in the air or the gun goes off or you start the game, all hell breaks loose, right? The game plan doesn't always fold as it should. So your ability to accept that and acknowledge and grow from it is going to enable you to become more successful in those times. So that's the first piece. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. The second part is the journey of self-discovery. That's where I'm going to talk about that brain functionality and how you can manage, based off understanding brain functionality, understanding your style, your disc style, you can better predict those things that are going to set you in a negative state of mind and not let it happen, and how you can resolve that in a positive light. So we'll talk a little bit about brain functionality and that disc survey, how you can learn to understand your emotional triggers and responses. And then the last thing, on a daily basis, what things can I do more on a preventative basis to strengthen me for when those difficult times hit? So we're going to talk about something called a situational debrief, which will allow you to start setting a pattern. Anytime an adverse situation happens or you lose a game, you can walk through a 4-step process and rethink this, see it from a non-emotional perspective, look how you could handle it differently, so then when it happens again, guess what you do? You handle it in a more productive manner. Because we tend to, something negative happens, we don't really think back at, what did happen? What could I have done better? What did I learn from this? That's what the debrief does. And then there's things we can do every day to help us become stronger, becomes more stronger people, so when adversity strikes, we can become better. Okay. Any questions? We okay? Okay. So let's get into the first part, our perception of adversity. Your perception of adversity will determine the outcome. So accept that adversity happens and look at how you view adversity. This part I really took from one of the gentlemen I interviewed for my book, possibly the most influential guy interviewed for the book, and gave me the money quote for the book as well too. His name is Chad Hymas. Chad is one of the most successful public speakers on the public speaking circuit now. He's a quadriplegic. It takes him 2 hours to get dressed every morning, yet he is on the road 200 days a year. So I had a chance to interview Chad, and I interviewed him about his vantage point of adversity. Let me give you his story first. Chad was a elk farmer living in Utah. It was a big farm, not a little farm. I made a big farm, and he had, I think, his first child. And he was moving bales of hay in the barn, and these were 1,000-pound bales of hay. These weren't little bales of hay. I mean, they were massive bales of hay. So he's on a tractor loading these bales of hay, getting towards the end of the day, 5 o'clock, starting to get a little dark. And his wife calls him on a cell phone, says, hey, our son is going to take his first steps. We just want to let you know, can see it happen. So he's all excited, moving the bales of hay. All of a sudden, his tractor starts shaking. So he looks, and he needs hydraulic fluid. He figures, I only have one more bale to do, doesn't change it. The bale of hay, the tractor broke, the bale of hay collapses on him, wedges him in the seat. 1,000-pound bale of hay. No one's around. So he's coughing blood, can hardly breathe, and he's sitting there. He said it was anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour, just struggling to live, struggling to breathe. And he could see the headlights of a car come in. He could see his wife's feet coming, and she runs back away. So he figures, well, she saw what's going on and runs back to the car and gets help. Another 20 minutes, half hour go by, and he's struggling for his life. And they come in the fire department, they're trying to lift the bale of hay, and he's trying to say, and blood coming out of his mouth, crunched under a bale of hay, he's trying to say, cut the string. What would cut the string have done? The hay would have simply collapsed. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit later, but essentially they couldn't hear him, so they moved the bale of hay off of him. Saved his life, but he ended up being laid up in a hospital and a quadriplegic. As I said, he's now one of the most successful public speakers on a public speaking circuit. He's done several marathons via a wheelchair. I mean, he has all these wild obstacles he's overcome. And when I ask him about adversity, because do you think he's had some adversity? He didn't let it get the worst of him, though. I said, if I can say one thing, what would you recommend, people learn from my book? He said, it all depends on the lens you choose to view that adverse situation. If you choose to view it as a negative thing, guess what? It's going to be a negative thing. If you choose to look at that as a positive thing, what you can learn, how can you help others through it, it can be a positive thing. And that was his big takeaway. It's our view of adversity, the view of these difficulties in our lives. It's going to determine how we overcome them, if we overcome them. Does everyone understand? Really amazing guy. He gave me my money quote in my book. Everybody loves this. This quote's in my book. Sometimes when you're in the dark place, you think you've been planted, but actually you've been buried. What does he mean by that? Sometimes when you're in a dark place, you think you've been buried, but you've actually been planted. Did I say it the other way around? Okay. I'm sorry. I'm losing my mind. What does he mean by that? Sometimes when you've been buried, you've actually been planted. What's that? You have an opportunity to grow. You know, that metaphor is basically that adverse situation when he thought he was buried. It was actually a new beginning for him. When my parents' house collapsed, I dealt with that summer. I was planted. I thought I was buried. Remember, I said my head was ready to explode. But I was planted. It was meant to happen for a reason. It changed my life immensely. It gave me enormous confidence. It helped me land the dream job out of college. I had several offers. I chose a dream job. My first interviewer of that job that I took is still my mentor to this day. So many wonderful things happened in that. I would never wanted it or thought it'd be that, but at that moment, my parents' house collapsed. That whole thing happened. I thought I was buried, and then essentially I was planted for bigger things. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So the first thing is accept, life's not fair, guys. Life doesn't happen on our schedule all the time. Adversity is going to happen, accept that. What am I going to do about that now? Acknowledge it's a chance for me to learn, grow, and become that person I was meant to become, okay? Next, self-discovery. So the second part is self-discovery, self-knowledge, knowing yourself, knowing others is intelligence, knowing yourself is true wisdom, mastering others is strength, mastering yourself is true power. Each day we can learn, grow. The more we understand about ourselves, the stronger we are going to be in facing life's obstacles as well too. And that's what I'm going to get in a little bit as well too. So I'm going to talk about brain functionality under stressful situations. As I said, I learned this from my kickboxing instructor. His name's Eric Parker, and I'm going to talk about Eric Parker in a bit. He talks about two essential parts of the brain. The limbic system's the first part. Does anybody know what the limbic system is? Has anyone heard of the limbic system? Okay, that's called our primitive brain. We are born, our limbic system's the first thing we're born with. It's all emotional. It's about freeze, fight, or flight. It's our survival, the survival part of our brain. When we're functioning in the limbic system, the adrenaline starts rushing, and our response to adversity is going to be freeze, fight, or flight. Does everyone know what I mean by that? You freeze, I don't want to deal with it. You run away from its flight. Fight is I'm getting mad about it. That's our emotional brain. We're born with that. That's been the major part of the brain since we were cavemen and women. When a lion roared, what did we do? Adrenaline started rushing, our limbic system kicked in place, and we ran to the cave. Does everyone understand? That's that emotional response. It should evolve through time. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it evolves at different times for different people. The other part of the brain is called our cortex. How many people have heard that part of the brain? The cortex part of the brain is where it's our rational brain, where reason and logic reside. It's where formulating, planning occurs. You draw lessons from situations learned and based off of experience and plans. You realize that you have options. I don't have to fight. I don't have to freeze. I don't have to run away from this. You have options to think through that. Does that make sense? Your cortex part of the brain should evolve through time. Your learnings, your experience, life's experiences. Going to school now, you're developing your cortex part of the brain because he's giving you problems, you're learning new skills, you're learning fundamentals, putting those skills in a practice, in a problem. He's essentially helping you evolve your cortex part of the brain. So if you don't study, you get the exam, you look at that exam, how many people start feeling adrenaline rushing? You start freezing or getting worried or emotional. How many have had that happen? You can fess up. I didn't always study like I should. What's happening now? You didn't study. You're kicking into that emotional part of your brain. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? When you're in that emotional part of the brain, it's hard to get out of it. You're not going to be able to jump out and think rationally and logically. That's what's so important about studying. He's preparing you with building blocks to help you evolve and become better at whatever in this class, in these lessons you're learning. And he's preparing you to think here rather than there. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Seriously, how many people raise your hands? You didn't study, You look at that exam and you start panicking. How many people have had that happen? Yeah, that adrenaline's going. That's because you're in that limbic part of the brain. You're not able to think rationally because you didn't do your homework. So that works there as well too. So I learned this from my kickboxing instructor. His name's Eric Parker. Interesting man. Eric Parker was a police officer in the Indianapolis police force. He was leader of the SWAT team that led the police force into drug raids. And he was a certified tactical instructor on munitions, deadly weapons. I mean, he was the man. He was a K-9 instructor, so he had the dogs as well too. So he was a pretty learned police officer, and he trained the other officers on all these skills. And his whole point was, he's preparing these officers for when an adverse situation happens, they are responding logically. Does everyone follow what I'm saying? So he's preparing them to, when you're in that, there's a rough situation, you're doing a drug raid, you have guns, you better know what you're doing. So he not only teaches that, he lived it. He was leading a drug raid with a shotgun. They kicked the door down and he shot. They flayed his arm, his shooting arm, flayed. I've seen pictures, looks like a pancake. He's down. He had the wherewithal to keep his mind, not fall into that limbic system, return fire with his pistol with his non-shooting hand and reload 3 times. He says because he did not what? He did not fall into that emotional limbic state of mind. He fell back on his training. Does everyone follow? He says that 33% of police officers are killed during felonious assault because they witnessed their own death. What do you think he means by that? They don't fall back on this. They witness their own death. They freeze, and they end up dying. So he talks about how to do that, how that brain functions. You want to be in the cortex. What part? Well, let's go backwards. I'm giving it away. What part of the brain do you want to be in when you're facing adversity? Cortex. You freeze, fight, or flight, you ain't going to solve the problem. When you're freezing, you can't think. When you're flighting, I don't want to deal with it. It'll go away. Or when you're fighting, you get mad and you don't make the best decisions. And that's what he talks about, is being in that cortex part of your brain when adversity strikes. He teaches that. So he's a former police SWAT team leader. He's an undefeated Muay Thai amateur kickboxer. He owned a business. I'm trying to think what else he did. He's an interesting dude. And now he's a private banker for Morgan Stanley. I mean, the guy's self-made, changes his career, and just a really interesting guy. But he teaches martial artists the same philosophy. So metaphorically, from a kickboxing perspective, he teaches fighters how to throw the basic punch. 1, 2, 1, 2. How to throw a kick over and over again. Practicing those same skills. Basketball players, layups, whatever those basic, soccer players, what are those fundamentals? And he teaches over and over the fundamentals. He's getting used to using these fundamentals. He wants you to be an expert in the fundamentals. Then he puts the fighters into sparring situations where they're doing what? They're using these fundamentals in real life situations. He'll even put an eye patch on a fighter when they're sparring. What does that do? Why is that important? Why does he want to mess with their depth perception while they're sparring? So when you're in a real MMA fighter or boxing match, if they close your eye or you're a little dazzled, you don't panic. I've been here before. I'm not panicking. So those of you, we're in class, we're learning basics. He gives you a test. It's preparing you to not panic for these skills you're learning. All folks playing sports, those fundamentals you're doing, your coaches are going over and over and over. It's a reason. They're trying to reinstill those fundamentals. And then when you do a scrimmage, what are they doing? Putting you in a real world environment. So when it happens game time, you're used to it. You've been there. You're not surprised. You function here rather than there. Does everyone follow what I'm saying? I do the same thing in my work. Other successful coaches do the same. One of the people I interviewed in my book his name's Ken O'Keefe. He's a quarterback coach for the University of Iowa. I interviewed with him. He tells his quarterbacks on the off season, I want you to go throw in a rainstorm. Not a thunderstorm, a rainstorm. I want you to throw into the rain. I want you to throw into the wind. I want you to throw against the wind. What's he trying to do for them? Why is he telling them that? Is he crazy? He wants them to get wet? Why is he doing that? When that quarterback's playing in that rainy day at Ohio State and it's raining, it's muddy, guess what? That quarterback's prepared. He has thrown in that type of environment already. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So our ability, that's what I'm saying, the lessons we learn in life are preparing us to evolve here. My beef with the participation trophy is this. By not learning a lesson from losing, you're not building this. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? Or even winning. What did you learn from that being winning? You learned that hard work, practice, commitment, overcoming adversity can help me win. And that does this. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So our life every day teaches us to grow this part of our life. So when adversity strikes in our lives, we don't respond in that emotional state. Let's go back to my story in my hometown. Remember I said when my dad's lung collapsed, I felt like my head was going to explode? Remember that? I said what? 5 or 10 minutes later, I had a sense of calm. Why did thinking about what I just talked about now, why did I all of a sudden have that sense of calm? What's that? My dad prepared me. And that's the calm that came over me. I was very close to here. When that head was ready to, I felt like the world was on my shoulders. I was close to here, one of those three, or if not all three. Because what my dad prepared me to do, I was in here. Thank God. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So those lessons my dad taught me, those situations my dad, and he was no easy guy, man. He was a tough Italian. He was the toughest boss I ever had. But those lessons I learned prepared me for that day. And Coach Parker says the key when you're facing adversity is to prevent, when adversity strikes, you want to respond rationally, not emotionally. But he also says you want to prevent the transfer of authority from the cortex to the limbic system. What's he mean by that? You want to prevent the transfer of authority from your cortex part of the brain to the limbic part of the brain. What's he saying? What's that?
You don't want the limbic system to take over.
Right. You don't want that to take over. What happens when it takes over? If you're angry, can you only say, oh, I'm not mad anymore? Can you do that? Takes a little time, doesn't it? So his point is when you hit that limbic state, you're not going to get out of it right away. You've got to step back. And what he talks about, realize you have options. You don't have to get mad. You don't have to shut down. You don't have to run away. You can deal with it. Because that's going to be the way you overcome it, or at least learn a lesson from it. And that's what he says. For all you athletes out there, or anyone else, when an adverse situation's striking, when you're maybe seeing that test and you're starting to panic, don't let that freeze, fight, or flight come out. Because once you get there, not saying you can't get out, but it's not going to be right away. It's going to be after you're done with that test, or after the game's been won or lost. And that's when you have the regrets. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So that's a big part of what my book talks about, is understanding brain functionality and the importance to being prepared for adversity and how things happen in your brain during adversity, and why it's important to face it assertively and at least learn a lesson from it, because that's going to prepare you here. You know, how many athletes do your coaches review film afterwards, or review how the game went afterwards, or how you did afterwards? How many do that? This is what they're doing. They're trying to create a pattern. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? Do you review test results and stuff with these guys? That's Professor Adler's doing this. Connecting those dots between, what did we learn? What did we do wrong? So he's creating a pattern for you, or a coach is creating a pattern for you to be successful the next time you do that. And that's part of life too, and that's what I'll talk about, the situational debrief then in my book. Everything that happens in our life, we can rethink this. Every adverse situation, serious one I've gone through, I can walk through the situation that happened, what were the outcomes, what did I learn from it, and what could I have done differently? And that helps me reconnect the dots between, I learned a lesson from this. I might not have been successful, but at least I've learned a lesson. I'm prepared to handle that right the next time. Does everyone follow? Any questions? Thumbs up? Okay, excellent. So my book talks about, once again, this brain functionality. Then it also talks about a behavioral assessment called DISC. And if you, with purchase of the book, you get to take the DISC assessment for free. DISC is a behavioral assessment. It can help you understand your behavior style or your personality style. DISC is an acronym for 4 behavior styles or personality styles. D stands for dominance, I stands for influence, S stands for steadiness, C stands for compliance. Basically, you take the assessment, you learn what your style is. And typically, people are not only a D or I or S or C, we're typically blends of different styles. And there's no right or wrong style. It's basically how you behave, how you communicate. And the key is to know your style, know the plus sides of your style, know those rough sides of your style, and so you can better manage yourself better, and then how to interact with other people. And my book talks about, based on your DISC style, you can be more aware of those things that may set you in that emotional state. And what emotional state will it manifest with you? Are you a freezer? Are you a fighter? Are you a flighter? Or are you a blend of different things? I'm a freezer and a fighter. When adversity hits me, I freeze. I shut down. I'll internalize things. You know, I won't show any emotion. Not that I'm not emotional, I won't show it. Then after a certain point, I'll fight back. So I've been in a lot of adverse situations where stuff hits the fan, I'm quiet, I'm shut down. People don't think there's anything wrong with me because I'm not saying anything. Then then they're saying, whoo, who peed in Steve's Wheaties this morning? You know, what's his problem? Does everyone understand? So I've learned those things that may shut me down so I can be aware of it, and I know what it feels like to start internalizing so I can stop it. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So based on your DISC style, you can better predict those things are going to set you in an adverse situation and what your response is going to be. So let's go back to the 4 styles. D is a dominant person. They're the type A personality. They're aggressive, they love winning, they're, again, highly competitive, direct to the point, no nonsense. What do you think their emotional response is? Freeze, fight, or flight? Oh yeah, they're fighters, man. High Ds are fighters. They're going to come back at you. I's, influencers, are gregarious, talkative, outgoing, people-oriented. They love being around people, life of the party, highly extroverted. What do you think their limbic response is? Why you say freeze?
It's the opposite of what they do.
Okay. What else? They're close. They're more flighters. They won't avoid it. Everything's hunky-dory. I love, you know, things are good. They're more flighters. They'll run away from it because they don't want to deal with it. S's, steadiness styles, are a little bit more introverted. They like people. They like collaboration. They like working together. They're methodical people, very thoughtful, team-oriented. Their response, they are more freezers. I'm an SD blend. And then a compliance style is highly analytical, numbers-oriented, very risk-averse, don't like change. So their response is either freeze or fight. So they'll shut down because they overanalyze things, and then they might push back. So I'm an SD blend, so that ties perfectly what happens to me. I'm a freezer and a fighter. Knowledge of those triggers, what trigger me, and my response has enabled me to become better at self-managing. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So part of that is part of my book as well too. So a trigger is an adverse situation, adverse events, situations, or people that may trigger that emotional response for you. So events or situational. I don't like rapid change. I don't like to be forced into making quick decisions. If that starts, and that's not life. Life doesn't happen always the way you want it. But when that starts happening, that can set an emotional part of me, and then I'm going to freeze. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So I understand those situations and be prepared for those so I don't start freezing, and I'm able to handle them more directly. Does everyone follow what I'm saying? People. High S's are collaborative. They're a little bit more introverted. They like one-on-one interactions. I played 13 years of organized football as a baseball player. Coaches, how many people knows what it means to be put in a doghouse? Raise your hands. Is anyone in a doghouse now? How many people don't know what it means to be put in a doghouse? It means you're in trouble. And a coach says, hey, coach ain't talking to you, they're putting you in a doghouse. Does that make sense? So I'm not you're not doing good, I'm not going to talk to you. Well, some people that motivates. Me, it never motivated me. When a coach put me in a doghouse, I bought furniture for the doghouse, I decorated the doghouse. Meaning what? You're not motivating me. I'm not coming out of the damn doghouse. I'm not saying that's right, but the coaches, the yellers and screamers, never connected with me. It was those coaches who could connect with me on that one-on-one basis. You know, maybe pull me by the side with a face mask and give me a talking to, but didn't humiliate me in front of the other people. That didn't motivate me. I might be aging myself now. How many people have heard of the football coach Vince Lombardi? Okay, one of the winningest football coaches of all time. He helped the Green Bay Packers. I know I'm aging myself when people don't know who Vince Lombardi is anymore. But he won the first 2 Super Bowls with the Green Bay Packers. He was known as a great leader, motivator, and communicator. And he has a great quote. He said part of his success was he needed to learn how to lead and communicate. Lead, communicate, and motivate 40 different men, 40 different ways. Meaning he knew the hot buttons to push on all his players. Who he could yell at, who he could kick in the butt, who he had to kind of take one-on-one and deal with them one-on-one. That was part of the reason for his success. So he knew if he was coaching me, if he yelled and screamed at me, embarrassed me, kicked me off the field, he would set me in that emotional state. I'm going to shut down. And I'm not going to get the best out of Steve when he's shut down. I'm not saying I'm right by shutting down, but I'm helping you understand the dynamic of where people can set you in that limbic state of mind. Does everyone follow? Do you think other people can purposely put you in that limbic state of mind of freeze, fight, or flight? Are there any UFC fans in the room? Raise your hands. How many people know who Conor McGregor is? Conor McGregor purposely puts people in the limbic state of mind. He smacks talk, he goes at them, he gets them going, so they're not, when they're in a fight, they're not thinking logic, they just want to kill this guy, but they forgot everything they learned. Coach Parker will actually show videos of a boxer or a MMA fighter when they're in that limbic state of mind. You're taught to throw a punch straight on like that, 1, 2. When they're in that limbic state of mind, they start going. All their motor skills, because they're in that limbic state of mind, all their motor skills, so when you start that adrenaline rushing, your motor skills get lost as well too. So you're not functioning in the brain, your body's not responding as well too. So Conor McGregor can put people in that limbic state of mind. Now on the flip side, does anyone know what happened in the UFC fight this weekend? Okay, he put the guy in the limbic system so much, the guy that actually won lost his mind. He jumped into the audience and went after, he beat Conor McGregor, which was a big win. He's a calm, collected Russian guy, quiet, never says anything. After the fight, he beats Conor McGregor, submits him. One of Conor McGregor's coaches says something. He loses it, jumps out of the ring at the guy. They almost start a mass. So he was what? He was in the limbic state of mind. And it cost, I don't know if they've even paid him yet. He may lose his visa. So that moment of what? Getting in that limbic state of mind may cost him millions of dollars, may cost him ever fighting in the United States again. So see the importance of not letting yourself fall into that. It can be devastating if you fall in that limbic state. It could be one bad decision. Look at Chad Hymas. Not that he was in the limbic state of mind, but he maybe wasn't thinking rationally or thinking that I just need to change my hydraulic fluid. How would you like to live the rest of your life wishing you would have spent 3 minutes, how long does it take to change hydraulic? 5 minutes?
Yeah, yeah.
How would you like to go through your life wishing you had taken 5 minutes out of your life, been patient, and changed hydraulic fluid, and you would not be a quadriplegic? That's a tough, right? So these emotional things that happen to you, you be aware of those things because they could be very serious and damaging. So understand those things that trigger you, understanding those response and your reaction to it. And remember, the DISC styles, as we said, a dominance. How many people think they're a dominant style? Raise your hands. They're aggressive, competitive, fight, aggressive. Okay, how many people think they're influencers? They're people oriented, love being around people, love connecting with people, life of the party, extroverted? None in here?
There's a few in here.
They're just shy. How about much more like the steadiness style, much more introverted, but one-on-one, they like collaboration, like teamwork. And then how many people think they're the highly analytical, the number cruncher? And okay, so understanding if that is your style, here's what to be aware of. You know, if you're a dominant style, you might fight, and that might throw you off. If you're a freezer, you might not want to deal with. If you're a flighter, that's a freezer and freezer fight. If with purchase of the book, you get a DISC assessment, so you can understand what your DISC style is. And then there's a lot of information in my book. Not only understand that style, but what things may trigger you and what that response looks like and what you can do to better manage that whole dynamic. So, you know, consider the DISC blends. That's not just we are D or I or S or C, we're blends. I'm a D, SD blend. So, and like I said, the behavioral assessments in the book. And once again, to effectively deal with adversity, we must know our triggers and responses and ensure we have a rational reasoned response versus an emotional one. And as Coach Parker says, prevent the transfer of authority from the limbic system or from the cortex to the limbic system. Because once you're in freeze, fight, or flight, it's going to take time. But if you fall in that mode, you take an emotional response, decompress from the emotion, step back, and look at it rationally. You'll be surprised what you learn, and that's what I'm going to go into next. The last part of the book is building endurance on a daily basis. What can we do on a daily basis to strengthen our resolve, to become better? And I like the road to success is always under construction. Every day is a chance to learn. You know, I think I'm a fairly successful guy, but I sure as hell don't know everything yet. I have a lot to learn, and every day for me is a learning, an opportunity to learn, grow, and become better. Is it easy? No. I have to fight every day myself to remind myself of these things. But each day is better and better. My life illustrates that. So create a reservoir of options. Two things I talk about in my book is something called a situational debrief. That's basically when an adverse situation happens, whether it's a positive thing or whether you responded in that emotional way, take a step back from the emotion and debrief the situation. That's very similar to what these athletes, when you're going through watching film or watching the game plan, what did you learn? What were the outcomes? It's basically connecting the dots between what happened and what I learned from it, what I can do the next time. So situational debrief, let's say an adverse situation happens. Capture the situation, either talk with it with someone, write it down, relive it in the rational state so you can feel what happened. Capture the outcomes, good, bad, or different. Did I win? Did I lose? Did I lose my patience? Did I handle myself well? What did you learn from that situation? What could I have done differently? And what can I do next time? By following this situational debrief, you're going to enable yourself when this start learning those lessons and start preparing yourself to think in the cortex. Does everyone understand what I'm saying? So you don't fall into the same pattern again. What did I can go back to my parents' house with this and it's clear as a day. I can go back to my tough client and go through this, it's clear as a day. Because I'm seeing things from a rational state of mind. And it helps me down the road deal with it better next time. Does everyone follow? And that's in my book. And Professor Eller's going to give you my deck so you can have all this as well too. And the last thing I do is talk about daily things you can do daily to help you before adversity strikes, what you can do to better yourself and improve yourself. I talk about supporting yourself. That's find a mentor, a coach, a friend, a trusted confidant you can rely on when things hit. Don't bear the brunt of adverse situations alone. I've hired coaches before. I have my mentors. I have people I can lean on and bounce ideas. When things hit the fan, I'm not taking, so many of us take things on personal. How many do that? They don't seek help. Find trusted confidants to lean on and help communicate. Invest in yourself. You're investing yourself in schooling now, but take a class that you want to learn something on or you're afraid of. If you're afraid of, how many people are afraid of public speaking? Raise your hands, doing what I do. Maybe take a class, invest in that. Learn how to do that or learn something you want to learn about. Invest in yourself as well too. I still take classes. I learn, read every day, something new to help myself become better. Test yourself. Put yourself in uncomfortable positions. I hate writing books. Hate it. It's painful. I knew, because I published a book before, I've been published in articles before. I'm okay writing, but it's not fun for me. I knew when I'm writing this book, it is going to be a painful 6 months. But I knew, you know what, it's going to be better for me to do this. So put yourself in situations, I'm not saying risky, dumb situations, but put yourself in an environment that you're not comfortable with. That way you grow and learn and become better. And every day is a chance to, what I call refreshing yourself. Do things in your life to help you decompress. I do kickboxing, I do hot yoga. These are things I do on my off time that helps me get away from things. It's a way of relieving stress. Plus, I'm testing myself. I'm learning something new. I'm investing myself with yoga and Muay Thai too to help myself grow and learn. Every day is an opportunity for us to become better, and this daily maintenance are things we can do every day to prepare us for when those adverse situations happen, so we respond once again in that cortex part of the brain. So every day offers us the opportunity to strengthen our resolve and face adverse situations. And I'm going to end with a quote. I think it's appropriate because it ties to our area where Professor Eller and I grew up in Pittsburgh. It's a coal mining town. I think it's a great quote. My book was actually, I was thinking of a topic around this, but the quote is, a gem cannot, well, let's go backwards. How does a diamond become a diamond? What's a diamond before it is a diamond? It's a piece of coal. And that piece of coal turns into a diamond from years of pressure. And I think it's a great metaphor for life, that the gem cannot be perfected without friction, nor can man be perfected without trials. And that goes to that whole point of what I believe in, that adversity is meant in our lives to help us become the people we were meant to become. So once again, don't run away from those adverse situations. Assertively face them. You never know, you might overcome some tough things you didn't think you could. But at the least, there's no failure, folks, if you learn a valuable lesson from those things in our lives and whatnot as well, too.